What is going on, Alabama fans? Chris Daughtery here with the Alabama Football Report by Chat Sports. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking some takeaways from Alabama's first scrimmage. Some insiders out there, Clint, Brody, Smoot as well, putting some stuff out there regarding Alabama's first scrimmage. So we'll talk about that on today's show, as well as some coaches getting some pay raises for Alabama. And we're also going to be talking about Alabama's disappointing loss in the Elite Eight against Duke. We'll be recapping all that on today's show. But if you are excited about the future of Alabama basketball, make sure you drop a like on today's video. I know the season did not end the way a lot of us really wanted it to, but look, Nate Oates got a lot of faith in him for this Alabama basketball squad, and they went to the Elite Eight for the second year in a row, only the third Elite Eight in Alabama basketball history. So there's a lot of positives to take away as well. So make sure you guys drop a like if you are excited about the future of some Alabama basketball. All right, first thing on today's show, we're going to talk about some, insider reporting on Alabama's first scrimmage. There's a lot of good that came out of Alabama's first scrimmage regarding, a lot of different positions, not just that quarterback position. We'll talk about that, but not just that quarterback position. So as a guy that we talked about the other day, Brody Smoot, from Touchdown Alabama magazine, put some stuff out there on Twitter about Alabama's first scrimmage. First thing I want to talk about here, he said Abduall, Sanders, and Kameron Howard had really, really good scrimmages for Alabama. And I think, especially when you look at that, we'll come back to the defensive backs here in a second. But first, I want to talk about the linebackers here for Alabama. I really do like what you have in terms of the starters there at that linebacker position for Alabama. Justin Jefferson, Deontay Lawson, both of those guys are going to be out for the springtime. But you got Nakai Hill-Green from Colorado out of the transfer portal as well. And you got Caden Jones, QB Reese, are really those guys there at that linebacker position who have more, or they've been in the program for longer anyways, so don't necessarily know who is going to be, your linebacker 4 going into next season. Hopefully you're not really going to need that, but with Deontay Lawson coming back from that knee injury, having somebody at least, in the waiting is going to be pretty solid. So really nice to see, Sanders there having a really good practice for Alabama. Because, you got Daryl Duke Johnson, you've got Luke Metz, Abduall Sanders, all those guys coming in this 2026 recruiting class. I have been kind of worried about the backups in terms of that linebacker position, but Abduall Sanders really solid out there in his first scrimmage, according to Brody Smoot. Some more stuff here in regards to Alabama's first scrimmage. He also said going to be difficult to keep Dijon and Lotzeir off the field as true freshmen. This one really excites me a lot because we've seen a lot and heard a lot from Dijon Lee. We've seen him a lot in those videos that Alabama's put out there from their scrimmages, from their practices. And man, this kid really does seem like he is legit. But I mean, look, when you're looking at this cornerback room, you've got Damani Jackson, you've got Xavier Brown out there. Those guys are most likely going to be your starters there at that cornerback position. And then after that, you got Cam Calhoun as well. He's, done some really nice things I've heard anyways so far here, or I guess everybody's heard, not necessarily just me, that's been put out there anyways. Cam Calhoun, what, was he like top 5 or something like that from the Pro Football Focus rankings and everything like that for Utah last season at that cornerback position. So that's just a positive thing. You're continuing to hear about Dijon Lee. And then you also continue to hear about a guy like Lotzeir Brooks as well, was severely underrated coming out of New Jersey, coming out of Alabama's 2025 recruiting class here. So when you look at this wide receiver room, man, it is really exciting. You've heard Keelon DeBoer talk about the fact that this wide receiver room is probably better than it was last year. And I think you look at it, you add an Isaiah Horton to it, which we'll talk about him here in just a second from some stuff that Clint Lamb was talking about. But Jalen Hill also really getting involved with Alabama this spring as well. I am so excited for Jalen Hill, man. Obviously last season he was sidelined from that injury, but, getting him back is just adding another weapon to this wide receiver group. You also got Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, Rico Scott, also another guy who has really impressed so far in Alabama spring practice. So When you talk about last year's wide receiver group compared to this year's wide receiver group, I really do think there's going to be a little bit of an upgrade at that wide receiver position. Not just, catching balls and running routes and things like that, but I do think this wide receiver group is going to be a whole lot more physical. I even went back and watched that Oklahoma game the other day. Those 2 interceptions from Jalen Milroe, Kobe Prentice missed blocks on both of those interceptions. So hopefully you can get guys out there who are going to be not just able to run routes and catch balls and get open, but also do those little dirty things like blocking as well. That is really, really important when you talk about Alabama at that wide receiver position. One more thing here from Brody Smoot. He also said Keelon Russell looks very good, but needs time to develop. I think that makes sense, right? I mean, Keelon Russell, everybody's super excited about him. Brody Smoot also put something out the other day talking about, getting comparisons to a guy like Jaden Daniels as well. But obviously, coming in as a freshman, I think it really does help to have somebody out there, that is you're still going to have to develop at the end of the day. But really high praise from Keelon Russell so far in his time so far here at Alabama. Just been here on campus for a couple of months, but the outlook on him is very, very good. Also, one of the most notable things here from Brody Smoot saying Ty Simpson is the solid number 1. I still do think that this is Ty Simpson's job to lose right now. That's something that Brody said the other day as well. But, as you continue into these spring practices and everything like that, this quarterback battle is going to heat up, and we're going to see if guys are really going to be able to separate themselves in this quarterback battle. This is what Clint Lamb over at Cover Crimson, friend of the show here, was talking about. Him and Mick Gillespie was talking about this quarterback room, what happened, so far in Alabama spring practices. And in regards as well to Isaiah Horton, Clint was talking about him and his connection with Ty Simpson. He said, yeah, they apparently put on a clinic in scrimmage. It was contested catches in the back of the end zone. It was a long touchdown catch. What I've heard about Ty Simpson is he has a confidence about him. He understands the offense on a deep level, and he's kind of winning the pre-snap mind games as far as understanding what the defense is presenting him, understanding what he wants or where he wants to go with the football. He continued on talking about just the quarterback battle in general. He said, while Keelon Russell was throwing some dots, I've heard he's done some really good stuff, and I've also heard that Mack has done some impressive stuff as well, though I actually heard that Keelon Russell probably looked better than Austin Mack yesterday, talking about Alabama's spring scrimmage on Thursday. I think Ty is kind of on a different level on that front right now, and it's just a matter of being able to build off of that. And I think that pretty much explains it perfectly right there. Clint does a phenomenal job in terms of articulating things a little bit better than I can. But, look, when Clint says something, when he's hearing stuff like that, that should really mean something. And I've been talking about Ty a lot this offseason in terms of I think he is the number 1 guy right now. And a lot of people, understandably have been talking about Austin Mack and Keelon Russell as well. But I do not think anybody should be overlooking Ty. And I do as well think, one of the biggest things, in regards to Ty Simpson out there, a lot of people continually say that, he hasn't done anything so far in his time here at Alabama. I just, want to continue to say, do not count him out in this race. It seems right now that he is the biggest leader on this team right now. Brody Smoot said that he was voted to the leadership council as well, and that is a really, really big thing in terms of that quarterback position. So let me know here at the pinned comment of today's video, is your confidence level growing in Ty Simpson? Type Y for yes or N for no at the pinned comment of today's video. Alabama also gave some coaches some raises here that I want to talk about here real quick. The most notable one, I think, I guess there's 2 notable ones, but the most notable one on the offensive side of the ball is Ryan Grubb. Greg Byrne saying, he had an existing contract with the Seattle Seahawks that kind of helped them structure the compensation for him. And there were also play callers within the SEC kind of in that range. So Ryan Grubb, $1 million for the next 2 years as well. Jamarcus Shepard, Robert Gillespie, your running back coach, Chris Kapelovich, Brian Ellis, your tight ends coach, Jay Nunez, also all getting raises here for Alabama. Then you go over to the defensive side of the ball as well. Freddie Roach getting a pay raise, couple $100,000 for him there on the pay raise. Jason Jones, you just hired him as another defensive backs coach. Coach Mo getting a 2-year extension as well, just under $1 million for him. Chuck Morrell, your linebackers coach, another 2-year extension for him. Christian Robinson, your outside linebackers coach, also getting an extension. And when you go here to some other raises as well, you got Courtney Morgan, your general manager. He is getting a 3-year, $875,000. I think that's up about $50,000 there for Courtney Morgan in terms of the pay raise there. But then you have guys like Jeff Allen, David Blue also getting pay raises for Alabama. So there's some, a lot of key guys here on this Alabama coaching staff that really do deserve it, in my opinion. So very excited to see those guys get some pay raises for Alabama. We'll continue on with our basketball coverage here in just a second, but make sure you guys just go over to chatsports.com/Bama hoodies. You guys can get up to 30% off right now on some Alabama football gear. They've got crew necks, they've got quarter zips, they've got hoodies, they've got everything that you guys could want. They got a lot of amazing deals going on right now over there on that Fanatics website. So make sure you guys go over, check it out. That link will be in the comments section and the description of today's show. There should also be a little clickable link over there in the corner that you guys can click on as well. That's chatsports.com/Bama hoodies. You guys can get up to 30% off today. All right, let's move over now to some Alabama basketball. Obviously, very, very disappointing into the season, but I do think you can take some positives away from this season as well. Look, Alabama going into this season, there are a lot of very high praise for them, a lot of very high expectations as well. But look, you're in the Elite Eight yet again for the second year in a row. I believe it's the third time in school history now that you went to the Elite Eight, got your asses beat by Duke. But look, at the end of the day, they're Duke. They are the bluest of blue bloods. And honestly, right now, they are the number one team in the country, in my opinion. Obviously, you got Auburn out there as well. But I do think Duke probably, at the end of the day, is going to take it away in this NCAA tournament. You can't really hate what Alabama was able to do in this NCAA tournament as well. But in terms of some of the takeaways for this game against Duke, look, man, you just really could not score in the paint. That's one of the biggest takeaways, in my opinion, for Alabama. Really, one of the differences in the game as well. Duke ended up scoring 40 points in the paint. Alabama only 20 points in the paint for this ball game. So, we knew going into this game that was going to be one of the major keys for Alabama. You can't teach size, and that's one thing that Duke had going into this game over Alabama was size. So, it was a really tough game all around for Alabama, but one of the biggest takeaways there, man, you just could not score in the paint, and Duke could. You really couldn't stop them at the end of the day. So get down in the comment section, support the squad. Go ahead and type RTR in the comment section as well. Now, as I'm pushing this graphic, I see I spelled support wrong, so it is what it is. But look, it's just kind of been that kind of a night. I'm filming this after Alabama's game going up against Duke there, so L's in the comments for me, just like L's in the comments for Alabama. But go ahead and support the squad. Type RTR for me right now. All right, my second takeaway from this game. Look, you were just cold shooting all night. Alabama, 35% from the field. They were 23 of 65 from the field. That's just not going to cut it, man. No matter who you're going up against. Alabama was only able to shoot 25% from the three as well. They were 8 for 32. They were okay at the free throw line. They were 11 for 14. But when you're shooting 35% from the field, 25% from three, you're just not going to be able to win ball games. Going up against one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team in the country in Duke, it just wasn't Alabama's night. They were not able to, they got some decent looks, I think, but they just were not able to make that ball go through the hoop. And at the end of the day, that is the name of the game. And look, Duke was just better. I mean, they've always been better, right? In my opinion, look, Nate Oates was talking about, it is a failed season if you go into this tournament and you don't make the Final Four, which I appreciate that mentality from your head coach, especially a guy that has come in and really changed the program. That is something that you really want. That's some Nick Saban mentality for you right there. But look, going into this game, I knew it was kind of going to be a long shot for Alabama to end up beating Duke. So, look, you made it to the Elite Eight once again. That's really not necessarily all you can ask for. You could obviously ask for a national championship, but Duke was always the better team, going into this matchup. And you ended up losing by 20. You cut the lead to 6 at one point in the second half there. But look, Duke, they are Duke. And, just because they don't have Coach K anymore does not mean that they are not one of the best teams in the country anymore. And I think you can say the same thing about Alabama football as well. I think they're kind of in that same boat as kind of Duke is right now in terms of, basketball to football, anyways there. But I look, Duke was always the better team. You were going in kind of playing with house money. Is what it is. Really does suck to lose. But takeaway number 4, in Nate Oates we trust. Look, Nate Oates is one of the best coaches in the country right now, and I do believe that he has got this team right now in a place where they're going to be able to compete for national championships. And as long as Alabama's able to do the right things in terms of supporting this Alabama basketball squad, I think Nate Oates is probably going to be here for the long haul as well. One of the biggest things that fans we've talked about is building the arena. Well, Nate Oates he wanted 2 things. He wanted money for NIL, and he wanted a new practice facility as well. And he's getting those 2 things here at Alabama. They're ending up, they're supporting him in terms of that, and I think Nate Oates does appreciate that. They're still going out. They're working hard really in the transfer portal right now, so that's very positive as well. But look, in Nate Oates we trust. Alabama is definitely going to be back to the Elite Eight next year, I think, and hopefully they can get a national championship here soon. Make sure you are subscribed right here to the Alabama Football Report. We got Alabama news, no more basketball content coming out, no more basketball watch parties, but we're going to be doing videos for you guys all off season long in terms of football. We got spring practice. We got the transfer portal. We've got recruiting. We've got a whole lot of stuff to talk about here. So make sure you guys are subscribed at youtube.com/@RollTideTV.